Hello, and welcome back to Resilient Walk. If you're standing at the edge of something, feeling the weight of walls you've built around yourself, maybe you're tired of playing small, of clipping your own wings to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold the fullness of who you are. Now, settle in. Let's travel to a vast mountainside, where ancient pines whisper secrets to the wind, and follow the story of a bird who forgot she was meant to soar. Luna was a young hawk, born in the highest nest of the tallest pine on the mountainside. But from her very first days, fear had made itself at home in her chest like a stone she couldn't swallow. Her parents had been everything a young hawk should aspire to be: bold hunters, graceful in flight, masters of the endless sky. They would soar on thermals that carried them so high they became mere specks against the clouds, returning with stories of distant valleys and shimmering lakes beyond the mountain's reach. "Come, Luna," her father would call from the edge of their nest. "The wind is perfect today. Let's teach you to ride the currents." But Luna would press herself against the back wall of the nest, her talons gripping the familiar bark. The world below seemed so vast, so full of unknowns. What if she fell? What if she wasn't strong enough? What if she was broken somehow? Her parents tried everything: gentle coaxing, patient demonstration, even bringing her favorite meals to the edge of the nest to tempt her forward. But Luna had convinced herself that the nest was enough. It was safe. It was known. It was small enough for her to understand every inch of it. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. Other young hawks began their maiden flights, their joyful cries echoing across the valley as they discovered the intoxicating freedom of flight. Luna would watch them from her perch, feeling a strange ache in her chest, like homesickness for a place she'd never been. Her parents grew worried. "You were born for the sky," her mother would whisper, preening Luna's flight feathers with tender care. "Your wings are strong. Your instincts are keen. Why do you fight against what you are?" But Luna had built an entire world inside her nest. She knew every twig, every soft moss bed, every safe corner where she could retreat when the world felt too big. She had become an expert at convincing herself that this small space was all she needed, that the yearning she felt watching other birds fly was just foolish dreaming. At night, Luna would stretch her wings in the darkness, feeling their span, their power. She would imagine what it might feel like to catch the wind, to rise above the trees, to see the world spread out below her like a vast, beautiful map. But when morning came, the fear would return, heavier than ever. She had forgotten that she was built for flight, that her hollow bones and keen eyes and powerful wings weren't accidents. They were gifts, waiting to be unwrapped. The moment that changed everything came with the storm. Luna woke one grey morning to the sound of wind like she'd never heard before. Not the gentle whispers that usually played through the pine branches, but a deep, howling song that seemed to shake the very mountain. The sky had turned the color of old pewter, and rain began to fall in heavy, determined drops. Her parents had left early that morning to hunt before the weather worsened, trusting that Luna would be safe in their sturdy nest. But as the wind grew stronger, Luna felt their home begin to sway in ways that terrified her. A massive gust hit the pine tree, and Luna watched in horror as a large branch, one that had seemed so permanent, tore away and tumbled down the mountainside, crashing through smaller trees until it disappeared from sight. For the first time in her life, the nest didn't feel safe. It felt fragile, temporary. Another gust, stronger than the first, and Luna felt the entire tree bend. She pressed herself against the nest's back wall, but there was nowhere to hide from the truth crashing over her like the rain. Staying small, staying safe, wasn't actually safe at all. As if the storm had been waiting for this realization, a tremendous wind hit the tree. Luna felt the nest tilt, felt herself sliding toward the edge she had avoided for so long. Her talons scrambled for purchase on the wet bark, but the nest was coming apart, piece by piece. In that terrifying moment, suspended between the familiar and the unknown, Luna understood something that changed everything. The nest had never been her real home. It had been her training ground. All this time, she had been preparing for something she was too afraid to claim. The choice was no longer whether to fly or stay safe. The choice was whether to fly or fall. Luna spread her wings, not the careful, tentative stretch she had practiced in secret, but a full, desperate extension. The wind caught her flight feathers, and for one heart-stopping moment, she felt herself lifted. She was no longer in the nest. She was no longer clinging to what was familiar. She was in the space between fear and trust, between the life she had known and the life she was meant to live. And in that space, she had to choose. Luna's first moments in the air were nothing like she had imagined. She didn't soar gracefully like the hawk she had watched. She flapped frantically, fought against the wind instead of dancing with it. Her landing in a lower tree was clumsy, undignified, her feathers ruffled and her pride bruised. But she was flying. Badly, perhaps, but flying nonetheless. When the storm passed and her parents found her in that smaller pine, wet and bedraggled but whole, her father's eyes filled with something Luna had never seen before. Not disappointment, but profound relief. "We thought we had lost you," her mother said, nuzzling Luna's feathers. "Not to the storm, but to fear." "I'm still afraid," Luna admitted, the words feeling strange but honest on her tongue. "Good," her father replied. "Fear means you understand that what you're doing matters. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's flying anyway." From that day forward, Luna's education in flight began in earnest. Instead of being pushed towards something she resisted, she was pulling towards something she finally recognized as her birthright. Her first real flight was short, just from one tree to another. But as her talons left the safety of the branch, Luna felt something she had never experienced before, the moment when her wings stopped fighting the air and began to dance with it. The wind that had once seemed like an enemy revealed itself as an ally. It wasn't trying to knock her down, it was trying to lift her up. She had simply never learned how to receive its gift. Day by day, Luna's flights grew longer. She discovered thermals, those invisible rivers of warm air that could carry her higher with less effort than she had ever imagined possible. She learned that flight wasn't about flapping harder, but about understanding the sky's moods and rhythms. One morning, she caught a thermal that lifted her higher than she had ever been. The mountains spread out below her like a detailed map, and she could see hidden valleys painted with wildflowers, silver streams threading through forests, and other mountains rising in the distance like sleeping giants. But the most profound discovery came when she encountered another young hawk, one who was still nest-bound like she had been. Luna perched on a branch near the frightened bird's tree and saw herself reflected in those terrified eyes. "The first flight is the hardest," Luna said gently. "But not because flying is difficult, because letting go feels impossible." The young hawk looked at Luna with wonder. "How did you find the courage?" "I realized that staying felt safe, but it wasn't actually keeping me safe. It was just keeping me small. And I was born for something bigger than small." She didn't push the young hawk to fly that day. Instead, she returned every morning, sharing stories of what she had seen, what she had learned. Sometimes courage needs to be modeled before it can be felt. When that young hawk finally took flight 2 weeks later, Luna felt something she hadn't expected, the deep joy of witnessing another soul remember their wings. A year later, Luna had become one of the finest hunters on the mountain. But more than that, she had become something she never planned to be, a guide for other young hawks who had forgotten their nature. She would visit nests where fear had taken root, not to push or coerce, but simply to exist as living proof that the sky wasn't something to be feared but something to be embraced. Her presence whispered what her words couldn't always convey. "If I can fly, so can you." Luna's parents watched with pride as their daughter, who had once been paralyzed by the thought of leaving her nest, now soared on thermals that carried her to distant peaks. But they were most proud of the way she shared her sky, how she flew alongside other young hawks, teaching them to read the wind, to trust their wings, to find joy in the endless dance of flight. One evening, as Luna settled on her favorite perch, not a nest, but an exposed rock where she could see the entire valley spread below, she reflected on her journey. The storm that had terrified her, that had forced her from her safe small world, had been the greatest gift she had ever received. She understood now that freedom wasn't a destination she had reached, but a choice she made every time she spread her wings. Every morning brought new winds, new challenges, new opportunities to either trust her nature or doubt it. The young hawks she mentored often asked her the secret to fearless flight. Luna would always smile and say, "I'm not fearless. I fly with my fear. I've learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision that something else matters more than being afraid." She had discovered that living authentically wasn't about one dramatic moment of transformation. It was about daily choosing expansion over contraction, possibility over safety, the sky over the nest. And on nights when doubt crept back in, because doubt, she had learned, was fear's quieter cousin, Luna would remember the feeling of that first thermal lifting her toward the clouds. She would remember that she had been born with everything she needed to soar. The sky had always been her home. She had simply needed to remember her address. Most importantly, Luna learned that her flight didn't just free her, it gave permission to others to remember their wings. Every time she soared, she was writing a message across the sky. This is what's possible. This is what you were made for. And so Luna discovered that the cage she had lived in was built from her own fears, and the key had always been written in the very structure of her bones, the span of her wings, the sharpness of her eyes. Perhaps your own freedom is closer than you think. Maybe you, too, have been confusing safety with smallness, comfort with captivity. Maybe you've forgotten that you were born with wings, not literal ones, perhaps, but the capacity to rise above circumstances, to see your life from new heights, to soar into possibilities you've only dreamed about. Your authentic self isn't a distant mountaintop to climb. It's the hawk within you that knows how to dance with the wind. The part of you that remembers, even when fear whispers otherwise, that you were built for bigger skies than the small spaces where you've made your nest. Remember, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that your dreams matter more than your doubts. The sky is waiting, and you already have everything you need to fly. May you trust your wings, may you find your thermals, and may you remember that you were never meant to live small. Be well, and rest easy.